All right, so let's run through some examples of translation into predicate logic. We're going to translate some sentences. I put these on the slide in order to save room on the whiteboard, so you can see these sentences on the slide when we actually start talking about them. First, I want to talk about their interpretation for a second. So translation into predicate logic, it really only makes sense given an interpretation that tells you what we're talking about. So the first thing in an interpretation, of course, is the universe of discourse. I often call this a domain. And a universe of discourse is just a set of objects or things that you're discussing. So one way to list a set, of course, is to have a set of curly brackets and then list everything that's in the set. Now, that's for practical reasons, that's not going to work with big sets. And obviously you can't do that with infinite sets. Like there's an infinite number of positive integers, which are positive whole numbers, right? So obviously we can't take this approach. So we just need to give a description of the set so that people know what we're talking about. Now we give the extensions of the predicates that we're going to be working with when we translate. And, again, we would list these. One way to do this is to have a set of everything that falls under that predicate, all the tuples that fall under that predicate. But, there's an infinite number of even numbers. So we just have to give a description here of what EX means. EX is all the positive integers that are even, right? Because we can't list them all. OX is X is odd. And here we have this two-place predicate that we can use whenever X is less than Y. So you need to keep the order straight here. This is different than LYX. And here we have PX, X is prime. And here we have the names for some of the numbers that we're going to be using for symbolization. Now, this strikes a lot of people as kind of odd. Like, why are we giving, for example, 4 this name C? Why don't we just call it 4? And the reason is we need to keep the objects separate from the names that we're giving them. Like, you make this distinction all the time when you use natural language. For example, if I say Albert is a cat, I'm saying that this furry little animal that runs around my apartment is a cat. I'm not saying that this word Albert is a cat. That doesn't even make sense. So it's the same thing when we do logic. We use names, we manipulate names like in our logical formulas to speak about actual objects. In this case, they're abstract objects, they're numbers, but they're objects nonetheless that are different than the names that we give them. So let's take a look at some examples here. So you can refer to the slide now. One is some positive integers are prime, but not all positive integers are prime. So that looks like it's 2 sentences linked by a but. That tells us that this is going to be a conjunction, right? Some positive integers are prime. So that word some clues us off that we need an existential quantifier. Some generally indicates an existential quantifier. So some positive integers are prime. So PX, EX, PX. So there is some positive integers that is prime. Notice we don't need any symbol to tell us that we're talking about positive integers. That's understood because of what the domain is. All right. So some positive integers are prime, but some positive integers are not prime. So again, we have this word some that indicates an existentially quantified sentence. Are not prime. So not PX. There you go. That's 1. So what about 2? No positive integer is less than itself. Okay, so no, there's a couple ways we can say no. One is like this. There's not some, there's not something that's less than itself. So LXY. So LXY means X is less than Y. So less than itself would be LXX. Okay? So that's one way to say this. There's in predicate logic, there's generally like kind of alternate ways to say the same thing. So another way to say this would be for all X, not so for everything, it's not less than itself. Okay. All right. So number 3, not every positive integer is less than 100. It's a true statement, right? So not every positive integer is less than 100. So every is a universal quantifier, but we're saying not every. So like this. So not every is less than 100. So LX, and what's our name for 100? It's D. So not every positive integer is less than 100. And again, there's alternate ways to say this. We could also symbolize it. This gets a little bit farther away from the English, but it means logically the same thing. There is some positive integer that's not less than 100. Okay? So what about 4? Not all positive integers are prime, and not all positive integers are not prime. So again, that sounds like it's going to be a conjunction because it has that and in the middle. Not all positive integers are prime. So not all, right? Because all indicates a universal quantifier, so we're saying not all positive integers are prime. And not all positive integers are not prime. So again, we have this not all. So not all positive integers are prime, and not all positive integers are not prime. All right, and our last one here, 1 is prime, and no positive integer is less than 1. So again, this is going to be a conjunction. 1 is prime. How do we say that? What's our name for 1? It's A. So PA. And no positive integer is less than 1. So no, we could symbolize that as does not exist, or there is nothing, or there is not something. In other words, like this. Less than, there is no positive integer such that it's less than 1. All right, so 1 is prime, and no so this is by the way is not a true statement. 1's not a prime number, but there's no positive integer less than 1. Okay.